Welcome to the And She Looked Up Creative Hour podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Hartfield, and I'm an artist and an entrepreneur. And yes, those two things can go together. This podcast is for the artists, the creatives, and the makers who want to find a way to make a living doing what they love. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the And She Looked Up podcast. As always, I'm your host, Melissa, and this week I'm really excited to be welcoming Lisa Lee, also known as the Viet Vegan, to the podcast. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. Lisa and I are going to be talking about YouTube today. And before we dive into that, just to give you a better sense of who Lisa is, if you're not familiar with her, she is the creator behind the Viet Vegan, which is a vegan and ethical lifestyle food blog and YouTube channel where she aims to advocate for veganism with an intersectional approach, creating vegan content with an environmentally conscious, LGBTQ inclusive, self-critical, and feminist lens. So that's pretty meaty right there. We could get into a lot there. But today we are mostly going to be looking at how to get started with YouTube. YouTube can be a very scary place for a lot of people. It involves cameras, and a lot of people don't like that. But we're going to be talking about how you can get started on the platform, get comfortable on the platform, and how it can be a really great tool to form a deeper connection with your audience, your customers, and the people that you create for. So we are going to have quite a bit to chat about today, which I'm looking forward to.
Me too.
All right. So Lisa, the first question I ask everybody who comes on the podcast is, did you feel like you were creative as a kid?
Most definitely. I think as a kid, my mom really forced like math and sciences on me. And granted, I was really good at both of those things, and I was significantly less good at artistic and creative endeavors, but I loved, like, I was always searching for different creative outlets. I think I was really lucky as a kid to be able to explore as many extracurriculars as I did. I think my mom's experience as a kid in Vietnam involved a lot of creativity and a lot of art, and I think that she wanted to make sure that I had that growing up here, but it's like way more expensive here. So I definitely appreciate the amount of effort and how much priority she put into making sure that I had access to art classes. I took piano from like age 6 until 18. I took dance, I did ceramics. Like, she just really like indulged all of my creativity. But I think the one outlet that I kept the most up throughout my life was probably like writing and journaling, if journaling counts as creative. I'm not sure,
I think it does. Sure.
It plays into a lot of like what I do now. And it's like the thing that I've been keeping up throughout all of my life. Cause like you can write from anywhere, right? You can write on your phone, you can write in a journal. And I was obsessed with like stationery as a kid. So I had like Hello Kitty notepads for days, just writing in those.
I'm still obsessed with stationery as an adult, so
Same.
I get that. So that's really cool, though. Your mom really gave you a lot of variety. You got to try a lot of different things that a lot of us don't get the opportunity to. So that's cool. What was it like for you growing up? I know your mom came from Vietnam. I can't remember if you were born in Vietnam or if you were born here, but
I was born here.
You were born here. Okay. I couldn't remember if you were or not. You know, I think that's something that a lot of Canadians can relate to, is growing up as the child of an immigrant. I'm the child of an immigrant, and it's definitely gives you a different perspective, I think, on things as you go through your childhood.
For sure. I grew up in like a pretty small waspy ski town in Ontario. And there was like 3 other Vietnamese people in the same like town. It was like a town, I think at the time it was like 15,000 people. So it was like I was surrounded by white people, and they like, I don't know, I dealt with like a lot of like racism and stuff like that. I mean, I think a lot of it I'm unpacking like really prominently now during like the Stop Asian Hate stuff, and like throughout even my time on YouTube, I've dealt with like some pretty silly racist comments here and there, but it definitely shaped how I approach things, like in terms of my identity, and like my identity plays in through a lot of the content that I create. So I grew up in like, yeah, like I said, a small town in Ontario. I moved to Barrie when I was like 13, and like most of my memories are in Barrie because like that's where I went to high school.
Your mom gave you the opportunity to try a lot of different creative things. And as you said, you were good at math and science in school. So when it came to figuring out what you wanted to do after school, where did you start to head? Did you start to go down that creative path, or did you go down a different path initially?
I don't even know how to describe the path that I took because it's like I approached the arts with a very mathematical mind, and like that can work for some people, but I was doing languages. So as I mentioned, I was like, I excelled much better in math and sciences. Like my grades in that were like high 90s. And then my grades in most of the art classes or music or language classes were in like the mid 80s, which is like still, I acknowledge
still pretty good, but
yeah. But for me, it was like a lot of effort for me to get an 85. Like I would spend hours on like a stinking French test or like studying for like different French assignments, and I would still like scrape by with like an 83, and I was like, oh my God. And I think that the satisfaction of getting good grades in languages was like something that I was like, I need to get better at this. I refuse to be bad at this. And so I sort of like bulldozed my way into university. I wanted to do something with like writing. I wanted to be an editor, but I didn't really know. Like my guidance counselor just like, yeah, get a degree in English. And I was like, well, what am I going to do with a degree in English if I can't make it as an editor? Like, what am I going to, like, what do I do with that? Right. So I decided to go for a very specialized field, which was translation. Which in retrospect, I don't know if that was really, anyway, I'll get into that in a second. But yeah, I did French, English, and Spanish translation. And then that's like when I started my blog. Like I was in third year and I was procrastinating my exams.
So many blogs started out that way. It's hilarious.
And that was like, when was that? I think that was like 2011. So that was like that sweet spot for blogs where people actually read blogs. And like that kind of stopped in like what, 2013, 2014. I feel like people kind of 2015. I feel like people stopped.
Yeah,
reading.
Probably around there. Yeah.
And so there was like a good 4 or 5 years of writing on the blog and also studying for translation, scraping by through school. I think I had like a decent, I think I was cum laude. Like it wasn't like, I didn't do amazingly. I was just strictly an average translator. And so I was like, well, I'm probably not going to hack it as a translator. Maybe I'll be a professor. And like, I don't even know what I was thinking. Like, I think when you're in like an Asian family that like really values education, the end goal is education, and they just think that an education will lead to a career, right? So my mom was like, do a master's. You can like, I wanted to go to school for computer software because I wanted to translate video games. And
that would be such a cool job.
It would have been cool if I had studied a language that was helpful for that. But like, I studied French and English. Like, like there's no games that are made in French really. They're in Japanese that require translation, or they need translation from English to those languages. But that's not how translation works. You always translate towards your mother tongue, and I would translate from Spanish and from French into English, and that is not a skill set for video game translators, which was a bummer. So anyway, I was like, maybe I go on like the other side and I become like a coder and I can figure out, I don't even know what I was thinking. Anyway, I wanted to go to college after my university degree. And then my mom was like, no, you should go to master's. You can always go back and do college, but you can't just go towards doing a master's. And I was like, yeah, okay. So I did a master's and I realized I hated academia. And I was living in Toronto at the time. And like, I was getting so like fed up with writing papers, reading really dense academic text. I mean, some of it was interesting. It was like I focused a lot on like feminist theory in translation, which is surprisingly like very feminist because most translators, well, not most translators, a lot of translators are women, and a lot of the translators that get recognition are men. So there's a lot of like gender that gets sort of erased in translation. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. This is not about that.
It's an interesting conversation though.
But yeah, like I just got so distracted by my master's that I was just kind of like, what am I doing here? How am I going to be a professor? I hate academia. Like, this is not going to work. So I finished my degree and I stumbled into a marketing job because of how much I was like getting drained by my degree, that I was like pouring all this energy into my blog. So I was like cooking a lot of stuff, because it started out as like a baking blog, and then it turned to like a vegetarian baking blog, and then it turned to like a vegan baking blog, and then just like a big journal with recipes. And I did a lot of like self marketing. I had to like learn the different social media avenues and figuring out, websites and coding and all that kind of stuff. So this was like kind of the early boom of digital marketing in food. And so I stumbled into a job where that was my focus, and I loved it. Like I think that was like the first thing where it immediately clicked for me, because translation is basically a communications degree, but focusing on certain languages.
Right.
So you understand, like, you have to like figure out, what is the point of this text? Why is this written? Who are you writing for? What language is best used for that person? And that's what marketing is, right? And so I applied my translation communications knowledge towards marketing, and it just like made sense. I think I just love dealing with people and understanding people and like creating content that like resonated with people.
So no education is ever wasted. That's the thing, right? Even if it's not where you're going, but you still gained a skill that took you where you felt more comfortable. So it's always, is that what you wound up doing your master's in, was also translation? Is that where you were going with that?
It sure was. Yeah.
When did vegetarianism and veganism start to come into focus for you? Did you grow up vegetarian, or is that something that you've adopted as you've gotten older?
Not at all. So like growing up, when I was like 10, I knew how to gut a fish. I knew how to clean like meat. My dad tried to be a hunter, and like I would help him clean sometimes. For a vegan, I know a lot about handling and cleaning meat and stuff like that, right? Like as a kid, the easiest thing is to like clean the shrimp, right? So you just like cut the back of it and like whatever. And like I did that as a kid. Fast forward to now, one of my TikToks went viral, and it like, I'm the vegan, so like obviously I'm vegan. And like on TikTok there was another TikToker who was vegan that like just turned everybody off of veganism. She was just like kind of like everything that I hate about veganism sometimes. But as a result, everybody hated me because I was also vegan. And so they just started tagging me in like butchers TikToks, and it's like, yeah, like as if I've never seen a carcass before. Like I don't know why I got to this, but
well, I was going to dive into this a little bit later when we got into some of the cons of YouTube, but it is one of those things that is very polarizing, even within the vegan community. I'm always quite in awe of people who are comfortable speaking about being vegan to such a broad audience, because I know that it can bring a lot of nasty stuff with
it's a weird time. It's a great community, but it's also a vicious community, depending on where people fall on the vegan spectrum.
Yeah. What was it that pulled you to that? Was it an ethical reason, or something you felt was really important to you? I'm always curious why people go down that path, because the reasons are so varied for it.
So I started out vegetarian to help heal with my eczema. I saw like a Chinese practitioner who gave me like this like mountain of Chinese herbs to turn into a tea, and for some reason I couldn't eat meat with it. And I was like, or like I could eat some meats, but I couldn't keep track of what. And I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm just like, I'm living on my own. I don't really like dealing with meat. I'll just go vegetarian. Like that's easy. And then I went vegetarian while drinking this tea, and then I just like enjoyed not having to clean blood or like worrying about cross contamination of like my cooking. That I was like, yeah, that's fine. I'll just stick to vegetarian. And then when I moved to Toronto, I just realized I said Toronto really weird. I said it like I don't.
You're not from Toronto.
I know, it's so weird. I was like, as I was saying it out loud, I was like, oh, they're gonna think I'm a poser. Anyway, I moved to Toronto, and I wanted to meet new people. And one of the best ways that I found throughout moving from place to place is that the best way to meet people is to like volunteer, because I generally find you find like like-minded people depending on the organization that you volunteer for, and generally good people. So I started volunteering for the Toronto Vegetarian Association, and I was vegetarian at the time. And when I was volunteering, they were just like, we just ask that you don't bring non-vegan things into the resource center. And I was like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. And the other people that I would volunteer with, they sort of dispelled everything that I thought vegans were. Like, they were pretty chill. They ate normal food. And like, I mean, some of it was like, okay, that's a very excessive salad. But like a lot of times it's just like, you had nachos, or like, you're eating chips, and it just sort of like opened my eyes to like you can have a pretty normal diet while eating vegan, or like a normal like lifestyle while being vegan. And I just sort of like, you know what? Yeah, that's fair. That's doable. I can do that. And then I just switched to vegan, especially because as soon as I started posting, I started experimenting with different vegan recipes on my blog, and those like exploded. And I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
people want vegan recipes. And that was like during like the 2015 boom of like new vegans. Like if you talk to a lot of vegans now, so many people will have said that they went vegan in 2015. And so I was like 2013 to 2015, I like transitioned in 2013, and it really like picked up in 2015. And I was just, I wouldn't say I was raking it in because I really wasn't, but from what it was before, I was hitting like 30,000 to like 50,000 page views a month, which was way more than what I had been getting, which was
Right.
like 300 a month. So it started with health reasons, and then it went to like ethical, and then like I learned a lot about like the sustainability. I learned about factory farming. I learned about like the ethics behind it, and I was like, I believe in all these things, and so here I am.
Here you
Yeah.
are. You had a marketing position. I don't think you still do that. You are the Viet vegan full time now. Is that right?
am, yeah.
Okay. When did you feel like, okay, this is something that I can do full time now? Was that after you started YouTube, or was it prior to YouTube?
It was after YouTube.
After YouTube. Where was the sign for you, like that this is going well and I can do this as my full-time gig now?
So I'm just gonna be like upfront. I don't make that much money on YouTube alone. I make money off of mostly sponsorships, which happen sometimes with YouTube, but mostly from my blog. So like my main income is still my blog, even though I focus a lot on YouTube, because YouTube drives people towards my blog. People like the only reason why people know who I am is because of the YouTube channel and the Instagram. So it like I kind of use it as like a large marketing tool, but then I also just really like the platform and like video as a concept, because I just love filmmaking and like watching YouTube content. So like if anyone wants to start a YouTube channel to make money, I would highly recommend that you diversify your income and not rely on YouTube just as an income source, because unless you have the level of production that is way more than one person can really afford on their own, you're not going to be pulling in like 100,000 to 200,000 to 1,000,000 views, which is what people need to like have a sustainable career from YouTube itself, especially from like, I think it was like the 2017, 2018 like adpocalypse, where they went like, if I'm going to be honest, right now I pull maybe $500 a month in ads alone on my YouTube channel, which is not a lot. I mean, it pays part of the rent, and it's definitely not nothing, but you know, 500 a month is not sustainable income, right?
Yeah.
Again, I don't have a very big channel. I have a very small dedicated audience, and that is what drives the channel's success. But there's other people who have way better quality content than I do. It's not about like the production value or any of that. It's just like the content that they create just hits people differently. And I acknowledge that I can't make, you know, that kind of viral content, and like I'm okay with it.
We had Pylin from Hot Thai Kitchen on the show about a month ago, and she does earn her full-time living from YouTube, but we were talking about Patreon, actually, not YouTube. For her to get to where she was making a full-time living took her a very long time. Like, it's not an overnight thing at all on YouTube. So I think that's really important for everybody to understand, is and we're going to be talking more about YouTube as a revenue diversification tactic, because I am all about revenue diversification. I think it's really really dangerous to build your business, especially in the digital sphere, on one platform. It makes you very vulnerable, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but what was it that attracted you to YouTube in the first place? Because for a lot of people, showing up on video is terrifying. Especially if they have to show their face on camera. And I know there's so many different ways that you can film so that you don't have to show your face on camera. But I do think that to make that kind of emotional connection with an audience, they do need to see you from time to time. So what was it that pulled you in and made you think like, oh, this is cool. I want to try this?
So it was like two different things. So one was, I actually had a YouTube channel when I was in high school. It was like I private all the videos. They're all terrible. But I had a lot of practice of like filming myself, watching myself, editing myself down, and like I used to hate it. And like I still don't love it, but it's come to the point where I've like disassociated the person that I'm watching on the screen from me. And like sometimes I'm like, oh my God, you idiot, why are you saying this thing? And it's just like I just cut it out. And like I've gotten over like it's just like separate person on the screen, and it's like it's not me. I'm not listening to me anymore. The other thing that sort of got me into YouTube is I started dating my now partner Eddie, and Eddie went to broadcast and film school, and he worked for a broadcasting company. I mean, he still does, but it's a different anyway.
Okay.
He basically was like, you should do a YouTube channel. You're very funny in person, and your blog is like super serious. I mean, at the time I was like writing about heartbreak. I had broken up with like a long-term relationship. I wrote about feelings. I wrote about identity. I wrote about like family. And like when people meet me in real life, they're always like, whoa, from your blog, I would not expect you to be this like funny person. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, I guess I should probably show a different side of my personality. And so Eddie was like, here, I'm setting up a camera. Here's a mic. Here's how to use Final Cut Pro 7, because that was like, I don't even touch 10 now. I don't understand how that works. I don't know if that's what you use or if you use that for your video editing, but I hate it.
I have Final Cut and Adobe. I have the whole Adobe suite because I'm a graphic designer, so I have both, but yes.
I use Premiere Pro because it's as similar to Final Cut 7 as I remember / better in my opinion. So he showed me the ropes of like, here's how you cut and here's how you do this and whatever. He has like a very like rudimentary knowledge of like editing. And so he like showed me how to do all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. And then I found that like I also joined towards like the end of like the YouTube boom of like joining for like foodie and like vegan creators, because like there was a time at the beginning of my channel that every single video got a minimum 10,000 views, and now I'm like lucky if I get 10,000 views. The way that they changed the algorithm and they changed the way that content is, and like it's just super saturated now. Anyway, I digress. So I started making videos, and I just found it way easier for me to like explain a recipe in person versus on the blog. Because on the blog people would ask me like, why do you do this, why do you do that, like why wouldn't you do this or why wouldn't you do that? And I was just like writing it out, like sometimes the tone can't be understood as well, and I find that as like a questioner I'm able to like explain reasons why I do X, Y, and Z better in like a video form, and then when people watch that they're like, oh, that makes sense or whatever. So it just like started driving, like it like tripled my views on my blog. And I was like, wow, okay.
It's so funny. I don't understand why more traditional, in quotation marks, food bloggers haven't embraced YouTube, because I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm a visual learner, but I can watch somebody make a recipe on YouTube and be like, and feel really confident about my ability to go into my kitchen and make the same thing. Whereas when I read a recipe on a blog, I'm like, there's a lot of ingredients, there's a lot of steps, that looks like it's going to take me a long time, I don't know, maybe I don't know if I can do that. Whereas I think, and I know a lot of food bloggers who have kind of gone the hands and pans path with video, which where you, for those who are not familiar with food blogging, that's where you just see the person's hands making the recipe in the pan. You don't actually really hear any talking or anything like that. But I've always just really, I think when you are making a recipe or showing people how to make a recipe, there's so much that goes into a dish, so much more than just the ingredients and the instructions as well. There's stories behind it. And I think we always hear this thing, like, oh, food bloggers, man, just stop with the story and let me get to the recipe, blah, 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 right? We hear that over and over again.
Sure do.
And yet on YouTube, that is where the people who want to hear the stories and who want to hear the ins and outs and get more detail, that's where they're hanging out. And I just...
That is not necessarily true.
No? Really?
No.
Do you have people who are like, shut up, just get on with it?
Seriously, the amount of people... So like the people who come to my channel and watch my channel is because I talk, but then someone who's just looking for like a random Vietnamese vegan recipe, and they're like, oh my God, just shut up and cook. And it's like, my dude, I have a recipe on the website that you can just skip to. Like you don't have to watch the video. You don't have to read the blog post. Like, you can skip ahead. And the entitlement sometimes that people have, they're like, oh my God, stop talking. It's like, just cook already. It's like,
it's hilarious.
rude.
I get quite a kick out of it, to be honest. It's just like, it's free content on the internet, so
Right?
just scroll. Like, scroll or hit the
Truly.
button.
I even have like a jump to recipe button on my
I know,
blog
most people
now.
do. But I do think it's just a really great way to form a bigger connection with these people who are interested. And I do think a lot of people are interested. It's just they're not the vocal ones. Like, the people who are vocal are the people who don't want to listen or scroll or whatever.
Yeah.
So the idea of being on camera, you're not super comfortable with it, but you've gotten used to it. Like, and I totally get that. I have the same thing with the podcast. I hate the sound of my voice, but I don't even hear it anymore when I'm editing. It's just
Like, it's not you anymore.
yeah,
It's
you just
like
tune
someone
it.
talking.
You're just tuning it out, right? And so I think it really is something that you have to get used to. And I remember this in high school because I did drama all through high school, and we had to do a lot of on-camera stuff where we had to perform monologues. More not to get comfortable on camera, but more to be able to see our performances. And it really was something that the more you did it, the more comfortable you got. And I think for all of those people out there who are listening, who are kind of like, I could never do video because I just don't think I could be on camera, I think once you start, it gets a lot easier. And you don't have to post those first 20, 30 videos that you make where you're feeling really weird. Like, you can practice that on your phone in your home and delete them all after you start to see, how you look and you get more comfortable with it. So I really hope that people who are worried about that aspect of it give themselves a little bit of grace and let themselves ease into it, get comfortable with it.
Absolutely. And like, I feel like when you start a YouTube channel, the best thing that you can do is watch other YouTubers that you enjoy. Watch the kind of content that you want to make and see how those people interact. How are they talking? Are they talking more like scripted? Is there more of like a specific, beginning, middle, and end to their kinds of content? Or is it more like a casual, chatty video? You have to like figure out what kind of content you want to create. And like, all YouTuber, like I would say like 90% of the YouTubers that are there right now are all introverts and very shy people. And I don't know what it is about a camera, but like talking to a camera is like way easier than like talking to a person IRL. They're like, we're all introverts, you know what I mean? Well, actually, I don't know if I'm technically an introvert. I think I'm technically an extrovert, but it's like I'm on the cusp. Anyway, the people I find who really connect well through a camera are really big introverts. And I feel like YouTube as a platform is a platform where people can connect without feeling that like nervousness and confrontation. Of course, it's still going to be like anxiety inducing, but as you mentioned, like you will get more comfortable with it and you will create the content that feels more natural to you in the end.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting way to look at it. Is almost from like a reverse engineering perspective, is find the content that really resonates with you and then watch it with a more critical eye, trying to figure out like,
for sure,
how did they do that? Like, walk the steps back and then turn it into smaller steps that you can start working on yourself. I think that's, I don't know, I like to reverse engineer everything. It's like,
Same.
how did they do that? And then sort of walk it back. And once I do that, it doesn't seem quite so overwhelming, like they did this big thing. But if you walk it back in small steps, it's like, okay, I could probably do that with a little bit of practice. So let's talk about gear, because this is another one that stops everyone. It's like, I don't have all the things. I don't have the lights. I don't have the camera. I don't have the editing software. And I know you've been doing this for a while, but when you first started, like, what did you start with? Did you have good gear, or were you just on your phone?
So I started out, like, I'll be honest, my production has gotten worse.
Oh, really? You think so? I don't think it
for
has.
sure. For sure. Let me explain how. So when I first started, Eddie had bought these lights because he wanted to be a streamer. And so he bought these like LED Go lights that were like pretty high quality. They're still the lights that I use now. I've never bought like video, like continuous lighting for myself. I don't like these lights. They're like bicolor. They're really hard to color correct. But they worked. I think they were I think they were like 1,500 at the time, which is a lot of money for sure. But there are way more affordable kits on like Amazon now. I think it's Cameron lights. And I've seen a kit that is just as bright, if not brighter than my lights. They're just not LED. And they were like $125 for a pack of 3 lights. And you usually want like a key light, like a fill light, and then a hair light. You can Google like lighting on YouTube if you want to figure out like the different 3-step lights. I only do a key light and a fill light. I don't do a hair light because people don't care. At least not for my channel. But if you want like a higher production quality, then like to set yourself apart from the background, then you can have that light. But like I said, there are different ranges of lighting that you can get to suit what you want. And if you want to pursue this and you're just like kind of like dipping your toe in the water and not really sure, you don't need studio lights. I mean, most kitchens are not bright enough for like super high quality video filming. You'll have to like crank up the ISO depending on what kind of camera you have. If you guys aren't familiar with that means, you'll just have a grainier video / photo, which is fine, because the secret about YouTube is that most people like they appreciate really high quality production quality, but if you have crap filming quality, if your picture is like kind of crap, but they just kind of can see you normally, but they can hear you perfectly, then they don't really care about the quality. There's nothing more frustrating than like being like watching a video and the audio is just inaudible. You have no idea what they're saying. You just click off, right?
Yeah, I think people will tolerate an awful lot as long as the audio is good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for gear, the only thing I really suggest that you invest in is a good microphone. So I think the mic that I was using for a few years was like a shotgun Rode mic that just sat on top of my camera, because otherwise my camera mic would just pick up my lens like autofocusing, and it's like super loud. It sounds like all the time. It's awful. Editing it is awful. Watching it is awful. Do not recommend. But having a unidirectional shotgun mic, there's like different price ranges. I think the one I bought was like $200, but there's like $300 ones and $500 ones. For microphones, you get what you pay for, but at the same time, depending on what your audience is looking for, they probably won't notice a difference, but you might notice a difference. I also recently got a lav mic, which I think is $300, but there are way cheaper ones. There's one that you can hook up to your phone. You can just basically like plug it into your phone to record your audio. Like there are like $20 budget options, and then there's like $300 budget options. So really for gear, I really just recommend some sort of lighting and good audio. And then for video, like your DSLR, your phone, most things will record in 1080p, and it doesn't really matter.
I think if you're just starting out, maybe you've never done this before, I think just start with your phone and just see if you like it first, right? You know,
for sure.
If once you start to realize that this is something you really enjoy doing and it's working for you, then start spending some money on it. So, but yeah, I think people get really, really intimidated by gear and the cost of it, but also just what it all does. I have these lights. What do I do with them? Like, where do I put them? And I think it depends. Like you said, kitchens can be a little bit dark, but in the creator community, I mean, I watch a lot of studio vlogs, and I think that's a really great way to connect with makers and artists, is watching their studio vlogs. But a lot of them do film on their phone or with a GoPro or something really small, and it works, you know, and that's a really, if you are an artist and you have a studio space, you probably have pretty good natural light as well. And there's certain ways you can probably position yourself, depending on what you're doing, so that you can take advantage of that natural light in the beginning, and then start adding more light, as you can never have enough light.
It's true. 100%.
Start adding more light as you go along. This is one of the things that I love about YouTube as a viewer, is I would say I appreciate the approachability of so many channels. Like, I don't feel like I'm watching a really slick, highly produced video. I feel like I'm watching somebody who's very relatable, because it is kind of chill and there's mistakes and stuff happens, and it just feels kind of like, okay, this could be me. I could do that. So
for sure.
I think there's something to be said for YouTube, whereas on Instagram, I feel like perfection is valued a lot more. But I feel like YouTube is a much more approachable platform in many ways, in that sense. So
It really is. I love studio vlogs. I watch a lot of like sticker makers and
yes, it's ridiculous.
Procreate like designers, and I just like love just they're watching them pack orders and like put stickers in
It's
in
so
an envelope.
soothing. I find
just
it
love
so
it.
soothing.
I really have a problem.
I found a channel recently. This is a little off topic, but she decorates her traveler's notebook, and it's all ASMR. There's no music, there's no talking. It's just her picking out her stationery and putting everything in. And
I love it.
Oh my! I'll send you a link to it. But I watch it every night.
God.
She posts every day, and I watch it every night before bed because it just calms me right down.
Soothing.
It's so soothing. And that's an example of, I will put a link to her channel in the show notes as well for those of you who want to check it out. But that's an example of somebody who does not appear on camera. It's just her hands and her journal and her supplies, and that's all you see. All you hear is her cutting and pasting, ripping things apart. So there's so many different ways that you can produce video content. No matter what your comfort level with being on camera, I think there's a way that you can create video in that makes you feel comfortable. So yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think the really important thing about creating content in YouTube is like figuring out what your why is and who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking to people who are like you and just love stationery and just want to watch people play around with stationery and make very satisfying, or I don't know, like I love swatching content. Like that's not even like super like difficult stuff to do, right? And it's just like, yeah, I just want to watch you fill in squares with different markers. Do it. I will watch hours of it.
Yep, absolutely.
You can connect with people with what makes you passionate. And like the amount of times I see people who start a YouTube channel and they're like, oh yeah, like this is what everyone's telling me that I need to do to be successful, and like they don't figure out their why. They don't really, you see like YouTuber, like people who watch YouTube can tell when someone's like forcing a video, if someone's forcing creativity, or they're just like making a video for the sake of making a video. Like you can tell, like, and people don't really want to watch that kind of content. So like make content that you want to watch, make content that you want to enjoy what you're doing, and people will watch it. That's it.
Yeah. I think that's true in any field, but especially video, because you really do see the person, and you're right, it is very obvious when it's just not coming from a place of excitement or interest. So if anybody has watched your channel, and I watch your channel quite often, you are pretty open about what you share on there. And this is another place where I think a lot of people struggle, is how much of themselves to put out there. Because I think when we do it on video, even though you might write very personal blog posts and things, I think for some reason when you do it on video, it feels even more vulnerable. Do you have, like, how do you draw the line personally between what you'll share and what you won't share? Is there a piece that you keep back so that you sort of feel like you're not putting it out all? I'm not being very articulate with this question.
No, I totally understand. I understand. Like, what boundaries do I place, and like, where does that boundary lie? I have learned over the years, especially with more and more people in my life, I have to set very firm boundaries on YouTube with what I share and who I allow on my channel. In the last year, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have dealt with like these sort of friendship breakups, but my best friend and I stopped talking, and so many people wanted me to create content about what happened, why are you no longer talking to your best friend, and blah blah blah. And it's like I had to draw that sort of boundary, because first off, it was a really painful like friendship breakup. I think people underestimate how deep friendship can go, and how it's like when you break up with a relationship, there's a lot more like, yeah, girl, like eat the ice cream, do whatever you gotta do, find yourself, la la la. But like there's less of that sort of support for a friendship breakup, especially when you share that person on your YouTube channel. People feel like they're entitled to knowing what happened and why. And I think talking about that can be cathartic, but when you involve different people on your channel, that content doesn't like those stories don't necessarily become yours to tell anymore. For example, with Eddie on my platform, he used to be a lot more on the channel. And I think over time, people just started getting really entitled about what they wanted from Eddie. And like, he just wasn't comfortable on camera anymore. People would point out like stuff about his face, his weight, like what he looked like, his appearance. Like, it just like, he wasn't happy on the platform. Like, he wasn't happy being in my videos. And I respected that he didn't want to be there anymore. And so for me, I have like almost no issue talking about pretty much anything about myself on the channel. So when it comes to the channel about myself, I talk about like periods, I talk about mental health, I talk about my internal struggles, my identity. I've talked about my grief when my dad passed away, but anything that like involves other people, I like respect, and I ask people like what they're comfortable with me talking about. And you know, there's a lot of people in my family who really didn't want me talking about my dad's death at all. And they're like, why do people need to know our business? La, la, la. And it's just like, you have to respect the boundaries of like the people in your life. And I think with YouTube, there is like a habit of like oversharing, which, don't get me wrong, I love it. I love watching channels that like really get into like the nitty gritty about feelings and like people breaking down on camera. Not that I enjoy the breaking down, but it's just like they really like open themselves up and are really vulnerable. And I think that is something that we so rarely see now in this like polished world of like Instagram. And you know, you like when the people that you see on the street, like a lot of people are like, really closed off, but like when it comes to like seeing these people like be really vulnerable on YouTube, I think it can be very powerful and it can be very like liberating, and a lot of people can really resonate with you, and that can be really strong, not only to help you like grow as a person, but grow your business, grow your brand. But there comes a point where you have to draw boundaries to make sure that you are keeping your mental health safe, and you know, not feeling afraid or burnt out from people like constantly asking about like, why is this not being talked about on the blog or on the YouTube channel? Like, how come you haven't talked about this? Or like, why did this happen? You know what I mean? You have to like figure out where you are okay with talking about things.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a tricky line to walk sometimes. I mean, I see not just with you, but so many of the YouTubers I follow, and this is kind of a bit of the darker side of YouTube, is just seeing the way people feel entitled to talk to you when you are. And I mean, there's a certain level of that, yes, you're putting yourself out there publicly and you have to expect a certain level of interest in what you're doing. I mean, that's kind of part of why you're doing it, right? You're trying to draw interest into what it is that you're talking about. But at the same time, you see things in the comments and the questions that you know that person would never in a million years say to your face if you were standing in front of them. Mm-hmm. And I'm always shocked, I guess, by it. And I know for a lot of people that's really challenging, and you've talked about it, and from a mental health perspective, and some of the things that you've had to put up with. And I think that can also be a bit of a scary thing for people when they're thinking about doing this. It's like, oh, I don't want to have people saying mean things to me. I don't want to have people attacking me or anything like that. And I know, and there are ways that you can deal with that on YouTube, depending on how you want to handle it, I think. Mm-hmm. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how that works, both from a logistical perspective, but also from just some of the ways that you deal with it from a more internal and mental health perspective.
For sure. So when it comes to like negative feedback, I feel like everyone probably notices the negative feedback way more than they like will let the positive feedback affect you, right?
Yes.
So for like my comments, I get like probably 100 amazing comments, and then there's one comment that just kind of like hits you
and it makes you mad.
It really does, you know? Yep. And I think I used to get way more incensed about those sort of like angry comments, and like now I don't know, maybe it's a problem, but like now I kind of like to troll back, but then I feel like I'm also feeding back into like the negative feedback or like the loop or whatever. I have a folder of screenshots of comments that are just like, what made you think this is okay? And like every now and then I'll post it on my Instagram, and people are like, oh my God, like that's awful, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm laughing at it, but I realize that a lot of people like see that and they get scared. So like, just know that like when you're creating content on YouTube or any like public platform, you really mostly get positive feedback, but then there's like one or two negative things, and like the frequency at which that affects you will decrease over time as you get more like, yeah, whatever. Like, I understand that you're having a bad day and you decide to take it out on the person who's showing you how to make kimchi on the internet. Like, just turn it off, go for a walk, have a drink of water. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to like realize, I'm like, it's not you, you know, it's like, it's whoever's dealing with whatever crap they're dealing with that day. And it's like, okay, this guy just, you know, needs a drink of water. Sometimes I just want to like comment, like, just go take a nap, man. Like, you're tired. Just chill out. But logistically, with your comment section, you can delete those comments if you want to. I usually have a banned list of words and profanity for my channel. Especially when it comes to like racial stuff, because I am a Vietnamese person who is partnered with a white man, and there's a lot of like, I don't know, it's 2021. I don't know why people still have a problem, but like the interracial relationship, people have a huge problem with sometimes. So I've like deleted a lot of them that are just like straight up offensive. Most stuff that is like about me or like criticizing me, I don't really care. I leave it up. It's like, right. Yeah, okay, that's fair. Like, you know, I talk too fast, sure. Or, you know what I mean? But if it's like about other people, I usually just delete it, because it's like, I give you permission to like discuss me, but like the guests on my channel, like, you don't have a right to like to talk about them like that. So I just delete it.
I think one of the interesting things too is that as you build a loyal following, a lot of them will come to your defense without you even having to say anything.
Sometimes they get really aggressive, and they will fight for you, and it's like, it's okay, like, I'm fine, like, you don't need to do this. But sometimes they're like, oh, this just makes me so mad, I'm gonna fight for you. It's like, I appreciate it, but I'm just gonna shut this down. Especially like the vegan stuff. The amount of time people are like, you should eat a whole foods plant-based diet. You should eat this. You should stop eating this. You eat too much junk food. You eat too processed food. And it's just like, I don't know if you ever watched my channel before, but like, I don't eat quote unquote healthy. I just eat whatever I ate before I was vegan, but now I just eat vegan.
I just find it so interesting how personally people take how other people eat.
It's so weird.
It's like, I don't really understand why it bothers you, and not just whether you're vegan, but just anything. Like, you know, I find it's a very weird world sometimes. But yes, I think from a troll perspective and things like that, it's I think as artists and as creatives, this is something that I think in some ways take a little more personally maybe than other people do. But at the flip side of that, I think it's something that we work in a very subjective field, and I think a lot of us know that what we do isn't going to be for everyone. And it's sort of, you have to find that line between like, okay, my stuff isn't your stuff. I get it. That's fine. And then realizing that it's not, while it may seem personal, it's not always personal. Sometimes it is personal, but you have to kind of balance the two. And there's a difference between somebody coming along and saying, you know what, this isn't for me, and somebody coming along and saying something that is really offensive and insulting to you as a person, and who you are as a person. Those are two different things. And I think trying to figure out the difference, because I know when you get those first few comments from people, like, and it may just be one comment in 1,000, but it's the comment you remember, right? It's the one that stands out in your head and haunts you until the next one. So it's hard to find that place where you feel comfortable. But like you said, there are tools that can help you manage that. And I don't even think you have to turn commenting on YouTube if you don't want to. Like,
you don't have to, but it does affect your place in the algorithm. I highly recommend, because it's engagement, right? So the more engagement a video gets, the more it gets pushed up the algorithm. So you know, it's sometimes it's a win-lose situation. Sometimes you get amazing stuff, sometimes you get crap stuff, and you know, just gotta sift through the garbage.
So from the perspective of building a community on YouTube, which is something that you are really good at, and this is where I think YouTube can be so helpful to so many creatives and artists, is I think a lot of us are trying to find people who want to buy our work or commission our work. And art, creativity, making things, there's a lot of personal connection that goes on there. When you buy a piece of art for your home, a lot of people want to know who made that and who are they, and know a little bit more about the artist. And this is a really great way to be able to connect with those people and show them the inner workings of your process, what goes on in your studio, how you create what it is that you create. And when you're creating your content for YouTube, what is it that you think draws your audience to you? Is it one thing in particular, or do you think it's multiple things? Do you think you have people who are there for very different reasons from each other?
I do have different people who want different things. I think the main core of like my super fans, the people who would buy merch and people who have asked me for merch, I have never done merch. I don't know. It's a whole other thing that I haven't gotten into. But the people who like come back time and time again are the people who like are really nosy and they want to know more about me. They want to know what I'm eating, what I'm buying. And like my main two drivers of traffic are my What I Eat in a Day vlogs and the grocery hauls. And like,
your grocery hauls are my favorite. I love watching what other people buy.
I love it too. And like, I see grocery hauls from some people, and like normally I'm just kind of like, ugh, like where are the chips, man? Like, show me the fun junk food. But yeah, I don't know. I think people just really like seeing someone buy completely different stuff from like what a lot of other vegans buy. Like a lot of people buy like cans of chickpeas and like, you know, spinach and bananas for smoothie. I don't know. Like I feel like I'm stereotyping vegans here, but like when I look at like my grocery hauls compared to like a lot of other people, it's just like, oh yeah, she bought a box of fuzzy candy that she never had before, but then ate it and then now can't stop buying fuzzy candy. Like, or you know, like those Surf Sweet peach rings. They're not good, but they're not bad, and I can't stop eating them. Anyway, people connect with that kind of stuff. So
well, it's very real, right? You know, most of us do not eat perfectly, right? So it's really nice to know that other people don't eat perfectly too.
Oh, that is me in a nutshell. I am very imperfect. One of my friends said that to me once, he started watching my channel before we like met in person, and so he was just kind of like, man, like sometimes I feel like you just roll out of bed and film a video, and I'm like, yeah, I do that sometimes for
and
sure.
That's what makes YouTube so great, is because it's just like okay, this person just rolled out of bed and I can connect with that. I understand it.
And it's like, I think it just like, there is a side of very polished YouTube that I appreciate, but ultimately makes me feel like garbage when I watch it. Because it's like, my house will never be this clean. My hair will never be that shiny. My skin will never be that clear. And like the filters and the way I dress will never look that nice. And I've just like come to accept, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'm just a little trashy, and that's fine. And people,
I wouldn't say you're trashy, but
well, there's definitely times where I literally roll out of bed and I turn on the camera and I'm like, oh wow, my hair looks terrible. Oh well, whatever. Like, I don't know. I think it's important to show people unpolished versions of you.
Yeah.
And you know, granted, I get way more positive feedback from when I do put on like a full face of makeup and do my hair, and they're like, oh my god, Lisa looks so great today. Like, Lisa coming in with fire. Like, my comment section is like lit with emojis. But then on like the What I Eat in a Day vlogs, people are like, yeah, you just like a regular person at home during quarantine, no makeup, wearing a very large sweater. Yep. That is me.
That's all of us, I think. Yeah. With your audience, are they, because this is another thing I think, particularly if you come from the more traditional blogging sphere, but even with Instagram and other social channels, is a lot of people start to feel very locked into the type of content that they can create for their viewers, their readers, their listeners. And it makes them afraid to experiment. Have you had, because you talk about a lot of different things on your channel, and you are interested in a lot of different things. Is your audience really tolerant of you experimenting, or do you hear from them when you do something that's a little different? Like, how do they feel about that?
I think I'm always surprised at what people will watch from me. For example, the book content that I was doing, I read books, then I talked about books for like half an hour or like an hour, and I was just kind of like, why do you, this is a lot of talking. And like, granted, I only get like a fifth of the views that I normally get on a video with those videos, but the people who watch those videos are very fervently DMing me, being like, make more book videos. I like this content. You know what I mean? So I think you'll like, the same way that you would diversify revenue with the different streams of like YouTube, Patreon, your blog, sponsored content, freelance work, all that kind of stuff. Do the same with the content that you make. Not only does it keep you from burning out from making the same thing over and over and over, because as creatives, we need different stimulus, you know, we need different outlets. I personally experiment with all content. And I think there are pros and then there are cons about that. The pros are the people who stick around and watch will literally watch anything from me. I don't understand it, but I appreciate it. But at the same time, it is what has held me back from hitting huge page views and huge milestones. Because some of my content that is the most popular is like Vietnamese recipes, very specific reviews. Yeah, basically like evergreen content, you know what I mean? But like evergreen content can be so tiring. It's like, I'm just tired of making yet another recipe. And like the people who will come back to watch that, like, well, not necessarily come back, but the people who watch that will come watch that video and never come back, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times those are like the evergreen content type things. And the people who really stick around and keep you tied and tethered to this platform, that keep you motivated to keep creating, want you to be happy. So make whatever content that makes you happy.
Yeah, and those are the people who become, you know, your Kevin Kelly 1,000 true fans. Those are the people who are going to buy. If you were to put a line of merchandise out there, they're the people who would buy from you.
Absolutely,
because they've connected with you in a much deeper way than that person who is just landing on your video for the specific recipe, and once they're done, they're done. So I think this is something that should actually free up a lot of people when they're worried about stuff like this. Is like, you know, the people who really love what you do, they're going to be there regardless of the type of content. And I mean, you will lose a person here and there, right? People's tastes change, the things they're into change, but a lot of those people are just excited to learn a little bit more about you from a different perspective. So I think that's something not to underestimate. So from a business perspective, before we wrap up here, you mentioned YouTube is not your full-time income. Like, it doesn't produce a full-time income for you. What other ways do you earn your revenue, without getting into specifics of how much and that kind of thing? But like, you mentioned sponsored content. Do you run ads on your blog as well?
I do, yeah. I would say my ads on my blog are like 60% of my revenue. Okay. And then sponsored content is like 20% and ads are 20%.
Okay. The like the YouTube ads.
YouTube ads.
Okay. Yeah, and that's that if you are looking at YouTube from a revenue perspective in terms of making money from ads, it is a tough slog. You really need a lot of views to generate revenue on that platform. But for those of you who are looking at YouTube as a way to market your creative business, this becomes like another tool to show a different side of yourself and to show the personality of your business and what goes on behind it, and give potential customers another way to connect with what you do. And I find this really hilarious. Like, I have a teeny tiny, when I say teeny tiny, I mean like teeny tiny YouTube channel with like 15 subscribers. And I've done like 3 or 4 videos and they've all had about 50 views. So like, woohoo. But all of them have been done surrounding for very specific reasons, and all of them except one have generated sales for me. Because,
wow.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy, and this is what really attracts me to it. Is like the first one I did was I make planner stickers as one of the things that I make. And I was constantly getting asked on Instagram, can you show us your planner? And I know you have a second Instagram account where you talk about your bullet journal and your plants, which I love. And so I just thought, you know what, when I made these planner stickers, people weren't really getting how to use them. So I'm like, I'm just going to make a video showing how I set up my planner and how I use the stickers. And after I put that up, the stickers started selling. People were like, okay. And I repurposed the video in other locations as well. And I started selling the stickers because people could see how I made them, what I used them for, and they just like you said, people are nosy. They want to see how you set your planner up because they want to know if you're doing it better than they are. Like can they like you know, planners are, that's a weird little field. But I did the same thing with my Valentine's product launch. I did a video, like a studio vlog, showing how I made them, showing the packaging, all the stuff that I love to watch, I put into that video. Yeah. And after launching it, I had $100 worth of sales, and most of my items, I know, and most of my stuff retails for between $4 and $10, so I don't have high ticket items.
That's amazing. That's huge.
I know, and I was just like, wow, and this is from a tiny audience. And I watched there's a few other Etsy sellers that I watch on YouTube, like, I don't know if you watch Catnip Illustrations out of the UK. I've been watching her since she started. She's huge now, but she was tiny when I started watching her. And she's gone from working out of her bedroom in her little 2-bedroom house to now she has an oceanfront studio.
Wow.
And she has 4 employees, and she's still selling on Etsy, and her vlogs are all studio vlogs, and she's just got this really bouncy, super vibrant personality. She's very real. She calls herself the giant marshmallow. Like she's just freaking adorable. And I think that's been a huge part of her Etsy success, is that she's very open, very generous in terms of showing people how to do what she does, showing her mistakes and how she's learning to run this business. And her illustrations are very cute, but people really connect with her. And she's got an Etsy shop that has, tens of thousands of sales behind it.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so I think there really is something there for those of you out there who are listening to this and wondering if YouTube is for you. And do you need a huge audience? No, you don't need a huge audience. You just need people who connect with what you do. And you don't need a lot of fancy stuff to get started. I film mine on my phone. So they're not the best quality by any means. And I'm sure in a year or two I'll be very embarrassed by them, but
Oh, I don't even look at my old videos anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't do it.
A lot of cringing, I'm sure.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, if this is something that you've been thinking about, I really do encourage you to give it a go and try it out. You mentioned you use Premiere Pro for your editing software.
I do.
Yeah, there are other tools out there as well that you can try, like Final Cut Pro. You could even start with iMovie, I'm sure.
I started with iMovie.
Yeah. It's very straightforward, and it's very simple to put it together and do the basics, and just give it a go and see what you can come up with and see how people connect with it. And the great thing about video content is you can repurpose it in so many other locations. So that's something to consider as well.
TikTok is actually huge for creators right now too.
Yes.
I feel like it's generally generating a lot of sales and eyeballs.
Yeah.
So
I've heard that too. I did start a TikTok account, but I haven't done anything with it yet. So
I mean, it's an overwhelming place. I trust me. One of my things went viral, and I have never been so overwhelmed in my life. I took a few days off because I was like, I don't know how to deal with this. This is too many people.
Crazy. Wow. What was the content of that video?
So I made seitan, and I was just showing people how to make seitan with flour and water. And I made the video on YouTube first, right? And it was just a general, I was watching a bunch of different places do this, and no one explained it in the way that I wanted it to. So I was like, fine, I'm going to make this video to explain it, because no one had measurements, and it was driving me bonkers. And so late that night, it was I think I posted on the Wednesday, and then Thursday I was like, maybe I'll try and make a video for TikTok or whatever. So I just edited a quick video, did a really quick crappy voiceover, posted it at like 11 o'clock, and then I went to bed. And then I woke up and I was like scrolling, and I was like, oh, I got 15 likes on this. That's pretty cool. And like, I have really bad eyesight, and then, so this was before I put on my glasses, and I like, as I was waking up, I like blinked, and I was like, there's a K beside that 15. What the heck? And like, at the time, I think I had like 100 followers, right? And so I was like, 15K likes, what the heck? And I looked, and it was over 200,000 like loops or like views or whatever. I don't even know what you call it on TikTok. I sound so old. But, you know what I mean? Sometimes I just like, oh man, TikTok is just like completely out of my field. And so as I was watching throughout that day, that number climbed up, and like I think it's over 1.4 million views right now. And like the comments, just like people just like went off because they're like, I hate Satan TikTok. Why am I here? Like, why is this on my For You page? Like, people just comment on there, like, and they don't even think about you as a person. They're just like, it's just a general forum. You know what I mean? And it's just like overwhelming.
Yeah, that's crazy. Over 1 million views though. That's just nuts.
Yeah. I mean, I get the revenue from that because like people are like, where are the measurements? It's like, it's a 1 minute video. I can't give you all the measurements in here. Like, you know, it's a long and complicated process. I have a blog post and a video that goes more in depth if you want that. And people wanted that. And so once you hit 1,000 followers on TikTok, you can put a link in. And I was like, great. So I put in a link as soon as I was able to. And my page views literally tripled from that one video. And so like, the revenue for that is hitting me in like 6 days, so that's going to be very exciting, but it's like, wow, really overwhelming.
Yeah, I could imagine it would be. I don't even know how I would feel if I knew 1 million people had looked at something I'd done. That would be so like, weird.
And it's something that was just like, yeah, whatever, I'll just throw it on TikTok. Who's going to watch it? Like,
yeah, well, you know what? That's the stuff that tends to go viral. It's just that stuff you don't even think twice about. You're just like, yeah, here, whatever. And boom, I was just listening to a podcast yesterday where somebody was saying the exact same thing, that they've learned to not get precious about their content because the stuff that they think is great and that they put a ton of time and energy into is the stuff that people generally are like, oh yeah, okay. And then the stuff that they throw up in like 10-15 minutes without much thought is the stuff that goes insanely popular. And I don't know. I think there must be something in there that the stuff that we put up really quickly is just the stuff that comes second nature to us, and we don't even really think of it being important or profound or anything like that. It's just stuff that is just you put it up there, but other people out there are starving for it for whatever reason, and it just hits a note. It's crazy.
I know. It's like that with like YouTube or Instagram. I'll put up a video that I've like really spent like a whole week editing or whatever, and people are like, oh yeah, I like this or whatever, and then the next day I post like a grocery haul from the floor, you know what I mean, and like that one gets like triple the views, and I'm like, what? This has like a quarter of the production quality. It took me 2 hours to edit this versus the other video that literally took me a week.
Yeah, so there is something there. I guess there's a lesson there or something to just kind of remind yourself that. I find it so interesting though what really will trigger people to just go crazy over something you've done, and the stuff that you've spent so much time and energy on is the stuff that kind of is like, that's nice.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, Lisa. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the show this week. You've shared a lot of information here, and I think people are going to find it really useful. But before we sign off, where can people find you on the internet?
Mostly YouTube, my blog, and Instagram. So I'm the Viet vegan everywhere. I'm very unoriginal that way, but also I guess that's strong branding, right?
It is.
But yeah, thevietvegan.com, the Viet Vegan YouTube channel, Instagram, also TikTok. Although I told you I'm very overwhelmed by it, so I literally haven't created content there in like probably over a month, because it was like, this is a platform I am afraid it's too powerful. But I am there.
Okay, we'll leave links to all of to Lisa's website and her social media accounts on the show notes, so you can check that out. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been so much fun. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm so sorry about the tangents. I hope that's not too difficult to
edit. No, I love tangents. That's what makes it interesting.
Great.
That's how you find out the juicy stuff. So no worries there at all. Okay, everyone. Well, thank you so much for listening this week, and I will be back with a new episode next week. So we will see you all then. Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. If you're looking for links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find detailed show notes on our website at andshелookedup.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter for more business tips, profiles of inspiring Canadian creative women, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the show via your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. We always love to hear from you, so we'd love it if you'd leave us a review through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Drop us a note via our website at andshелookedup.com or come say hi on Instagram at andshелookedup. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.